Dante Jones was only 24, but everyone in the city's martial arts circle knew his name. They called him the Cobra. He had a black belt in 2 styles, more than 50 trophies, and a strong fan base online. He was fast, strong, and proud. Maybe too proud. The local charity tournament was supposed to be a light-hearted event. It was open to all age groups and skill levels. Families came to watch, kids played in the corners, and old fighters met like friends after a long time. Was there, wearing his custom black GI with golden trim. His fans gathered around him, taking photos, calling out his name. Then something strange happened. An old woman, probably in her 70s, slowly walked into the gym. Her skin was dark, wrinkled with age, but her eyes were calm and steady. She wore a long shawl and carried a wooden cane with a carved lion's head. Her name tag said, Eliza B. Some people thought she was just someone's grandmother. But then she walked to the registration desk and said, I'd like to sign up. Dante, standing nearby, heard her voice. He turned around, surprised. You want to fight? He asked, loud enough for people to hear. He laughed and nudged his friend. She might trip before she even gets to the mat. Few people chuckled. Others looked uncomfortable. The event was meant to be friendly, but Dante's voice carried power. When he laughed, others followed. Eliza didn't respond to him. He simply smiled and filled out her form. Her handwriting was neat and steady. She handed it back and thanked the staff. Then she slowly walked to the waiting area and sat quietly, hands folded on her cane. One of the judges, an older man with gray hair, stared at her for a long time. Then he whispered to another official, Is that ... Eliza Bennett? The younger judge raised an eyebrow. Eliza Lightning Bennett, the man said. She was a legend in the 60s, national champion. She trained soldiers, police, even bodyguards. Then she disappeared after her husband died in an accident. Nobody heard from her since. The word started spreading quietly. Some older spectators looked at her again with new eyes. Few even stood up and nodded toward her in respect. But the younger crowd, especially Dante's fans, didn't take it seriously. She's old, someone whispered. Even if she was. Good. That was a long time ago. Dante stretched and yawned loudly. Let's be honest, he said. She won't make it past the first round. Eliza, sitting alone, closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't bothered by the noise. She had heard worse before. The world had always tried to forget women like her, quiet, strong, and disciplined. But she didn't come here to prove anything to the crowd. She came to remember who she used to be, and maybe, just maybe, to remind them. Eliza sat quietly near the edge of the gym, her cane resting beside her, her eyes watching the ring. Fighters came and went, matches were announced, and the crowd cheered. But she remained still, like a peaceful stone in the middle of a rushing. Most people didn't speak to her. Some gave her a polite smile. Few whispered to each other, wondering if she had signed up by mistake. But Eliza didn't seem confused or lost. In fact, she looked more focused than anyone else in the room. A young girl, around 10 years old, walked up to her. Excuse me, she said shyly. Are you really going to fight? Lisa smiled warmly. Yes, dear. I'm going to do my best. But aren't you scared? The girl asked. Those men are really strong. Eliza reached out and gently held the girl's hand. Strength comes in many forms, she said softly. And sometimes the strongest people don't look strong. Girl nodded slowly, then walked back to her seat, holding her mother's hand a little tighter. Something about Eliza's words stayed with her. Meanwhile, Dante was still showing off. He performed spinning kicks in the air, laughing with his friends and flexing for cameras. He pointed at Eliza and said, Look at her. She can barely walk. Someone's going to have to carry her out. One of the senior judges finally stepped forward. He was an old man named Mr. Raymond, who had once trained with the greats. He walked over to Eliza and bent down slightly. Eliza Bennett, he said with respect. It's been a long time. Eliza opened her eyes and gave him a kind smile. Hello, Ray. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me. You sure you want to do this? He asked gently. I don't need to win, she replied. Need to feel the floor under my feet one more time. To move like I used to show these young ones what real discipline looks like. Mr. Raymond stood up and nodded. Then I'm honored to witness it. Soon the announcer called her name. Eliza B., please report to the ring. The crowd turned, surprised. A few people gasped. Others looked confused. She stood up slowly, using her cane. Each step was steady. She handed her cane to the assistant and walked to the ring barefoot. Jim went quiet. Her opponent, a respectful young man named Yalin, bowed politely. He looked unsure, but calm. He had trained hard, but he didn't want to hurt someone's grandmother. The referee explained the rules. Eliza nodded. Then the bell rang. What happened next would surprise them all. For now, everyone simply watched curious, unsure, and suddenly silent. In that moment, Eliza didn't feel old. She felt alive, and the ring, once so far away in her past, was finally under her feet again. As Eliza stood in the ring, the crowd waited in silence. Some looked confused, some curious. Only a few remembered. But backstage, something had begun to change. One of the older judges, Mr. Thomas, stood frozen, staring at her. His hands trembled. Slightly, he leaned toward a younger official and whispered, "Do you know who that is?" The young man shook his head. "Just some brave old lady." Mr. Thomas gave a small smile. "That's not just anyone. That's Eliza Lightning Bennett. In the 1960s, she was a national karate champion. As fast as lightning, faster than most men. I saw her win tournaments with moves no one had seen before. She trained soldiers, police, even taught at military camps. Then one day she just disappeared." The young official's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Mr. Thomas nodded. "Very." Meanwhile, in the crowd, the older audience members began whispering too. Some of them remembered hearing her name on the radio, reading about her in old newspapers. A few even trained under her years ago, before life took her away from the spotlight. One elderly man stood up and wiped a tear from his eye. "That's her," he whispered. "She was a legend. She used to teach the art with heart, not ego. She didn't just fight. She taught people how to live with strength." Still, many younger spectators didn't know the story. All they saw was an old woman standing across from a tall young man named Yalin, who looked unsure whether to bow or back out. Yalin was nervous. He didn't want to hurt her. But he also didn't want to insult her by going easy. He looked at the referee, who gave him a small nod. The bell rang. Yalin moved slowly, trying to measure his distance. He lifted his hands and circled carefully. Eliza didn't move at first. She just watched. Her eyes studied him not like an opponent, but like a teacher observing a student. Then in one sudden motion, she stepped forward, gently touched his wrist, and turned her body. Yalin lost balance and stumbled forward. Before he could understand what happened, Eliza had already stepped aside and placed her palm gently on his back, guiding him to the mat. He landed softly. No pain, no injury, just confusion. The room gasped. The referee called the point. The crowd clapped politely, still unsure what they were witnessing. Eliza helped Yalin stand. "Good control," she said kindly. "You have talent. You just need patience." Yalin bowed deeply, now with real respect. "Yes, ma'am." The whispers grew louder. Phones came out. People began recording. Suddenly, Eliza was no longer a mystery. She was a story returning to life. Dante, standing near the back, crossed his arms. He narrowed his eyes. The smile on his face faded slightly. He didn't like surprises. Eliza walked back to her seat, calm and quiet, as if nothing unusual had happened. But those watching knew this was only the beginning. Wasn't just true, she was still writing it. After her quiet victory in the first round, Eliza returned to her seat with slow, graceful steps. She picked up her cane and sat down without a word. Around her, the atmosphere had changed. People were no longer laughing or whispering with doubt. Now, they were watching her closely with curiosity, with respect. And with a little bit of awe, some of the elders in the crowd nodded at each other with quiet smiles. They knew it was her. The legend had returned, not to prove something to the world, but perhaps to remind the world of what it had forgotten. Her opponent, Yalin, had returned to his corner, looking thoughtful, wasn't embarrassed. In fact, he looked proud, as if he had just passed a special test that no one else could give him. Eliza's next match was announced. She stood again, placed her cane gently against the wall, and stepped onto the mat once more. This time, her opponent was a much more confident fighter, a woman in her 30s, named Rita. Rita had won several local matches and had a strong build. She bowed quickly but didn't smile. It was clear she wanted to win and didn't want the crowd's sympathy for Eliza to distract her. The referee gave the signal. The match began. Rita rushed forward with quick jabs, moving fast and strong. Eliza didn't back away. She moved slightly to the side, letting Rita's attacks pass close but never touch. Her hands stayed calm, ready but not rushed. The crowd leaned forward. Suddenly, Eliza stepped in with one smooth motion, turned her hip, and gently swept Rita's leg. Rita fell not hard, but enough to lose balance. Before she hit the ground, Eliza caught her arm and guided her safely to the mat. The audience gasped again. Point, Eliza, backed away and waited. Rita stood, frustrated but not hurt. She rushed in again. This time, she was faster. Her kick almost landed, but Eliza spun around, lightly tapped Rita's shoulder, and used her own weight to bring her down again. Point now. The crowd was cheering. People clapped, stood up, and even called her name, Eliza. Lightning is back. Judges smiled. Even the announcer looked amazed. Dante watched from the side, arms still crossed. His eyes were sharp, focused, but quiet. He didn't speak this time. He just watched. After the third and final point, the match ended. Eliza had won again, without hurting anyone, without loud words or proud moves. Just calm, skillful action. She bowed to Rita, helped her up, whispered something no one else could hear. Rita smiled as Eliza walked back to her seat. Some of the younger fighters stepped aside to let her pass. They didn't laugh. They didn't whisper. They respected her. The crowd, once filled with doubt and jokes, had changed. They had seen something special, something rare. And as the day went on, people began to wonder what would happen if she faced Dante. And would he still be laughing then? Dante Jones stood near the edge of the ring with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. He had watched Eliza's last match with sharp eyes. The crowd's cheers for her had bothered him. First, she was just a joke to him, an old woman with a cane. But now, she had become the center of attention. People who once gathered around him were now recording her. Fans who once shouted his name were now clapping for her. And that didn't sit well with Dante. He walked up to the judges' table and said loudly, "Put me against her. I want the next match." The judges looked at each other, unsure. Mr. Raymond, the senior judge, stood and said, "Dante, the matches are already set. You'll face whoever wins in the final round." Dante shook his head. "I don't want to wait. She thinks she's the best. Let her prove it against the best." His voice was loud enough for the whole gym to hear. Some people murmured. Others looked concerned. A few even shook their heads at his tone. Eliza, sitting in the corner quietly, slowly stood up. She walked over to the judges' table without her cane this time. Her steps were steady, strong. She looked at Dante with calm eyes and said softly, "You're not my enemy, young man. You're just someone who hasn't learned yet." Dante smirked. "Then teach me." There was a short pause. Mr. Raymond finally nodded. "If both fighters agree, we'll allow an early exhibition match. 1 round only. Points count, but this is not for the final title." The crowd leaned forward in excitement. Phones came out. Everyone was ready. Eliza walked to the ring and stood in her corner. Dante jumped into his side like a pro, showing off his moves and stretching with quick punches. "Don't hold back," he said, grinning. "I want to see your real skills." Eliza gave a small smile. "Be careful what you ask for." The referee stepped in. Both bowed. The bell rang. Dante moved first. Fast. Sharp. Confident. He threw a kick that whooshed through the air. Eliza moved just enough to avoid it. Her eyes never left his. He threw another punch, quick and strong, but again. She stepped to the side. Dante frowned. He had never fought someone who moved so little, but read him so easily then, in one smooth motion. Eliza caught his wrist, spun around, and brought him to his knees in a controlled hold. She didn't hurt him, but she didn't have to. Point that. Crowd gasped. Dante stood up quickly, face red, and attacked again, this time faster. But again, Eliza dodged, redirected, and gently tapped his chest with her palm. Point. He stopped. He was breathing hard. She wasn't. And in that moment, Dante realized something. This wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding. He bowed. Eliza bowed back, and the gym, filled with silence, erupted in applause. After the match, the gym was quiet for a few seconds, then filled with loud clapping and cheers. Even those who had laughed at Eliza before were now on their feet, showing respect. Many had never seen anything like it, not because she was old, but because she was wise, calm, and powerful, without being loud or angry. Dante stepped out of the ring, still breathing hard. He didn't speak to his fans. He didn't joke. He just walked to the water table, sat down, and stared at his hands. He had lost, but not just the match. He had lost his pride, and strangely, felt peaceful about it. Eliza returned to her. See, a few people came over to thank her, to take photos, or simply say, "You're amazing." She smiled at all of them, but she didn't speak much. Her eyes were on the ring, and her thoughts were elsewhere. Mr. Raymond came over and sat. Beside her, "You could have won the whole tournament," he said. Eliza smiled gently. "Winning is not always the goal," he nodded. "Then why did you really come back?" She looked at the mat in front of her. "For many years I forgot who I was. After my husband passed, I gave up everything, my classes, my training, my name. I became just another old lady people walked past. I stopped moving, but inside I still had this fire." Raymond stayed silent, listening. "One day," she continued, "I saw a little girl being bullied at the park. I wanted to help, but my body had become too weak. That night I looked at myself in the mirror and asked, 'What happened to lightning?' And I knew I had to return, not to prove anything to others, but to remind myself who I used to be." Raymond smiled. "You did more than that. You reminded all of us." The final match was announced. Eliza had stepped out of the tournament, saying she'd already received what she came for. The other fighters respected her decision. They shook her hand, bowed, and thanked her as the final fight began. People were still talking about her. Dante walked over and stood in front of her. "Miss Eliza," he said quietly, "I was wrong. About you." She looked up at him with warm eyes. "I judged you by your age," he said. "I thought fighting was only about strength, but now I see. It's about control, focus, and respect." Eliza nodded. "Those are the real black belts." Dante bowed deeply, and this time it wasn't for show. It was from the heart. That day, something changed in the gym. The fighters were no longer just chasing trophies. They were chasing wisdom. The younger ones asked questions. The older ones told stories, and in the middle of it all sat a woman who had once been forgotten, but was now remembered by everyone. The match in the ring ended with loud cheers, but many eyes were still on Eliza, because sometimes the greatest battles happen quietly, and the biggest victories don't need medals. The tournament came to an end. Winners were called to the front, medals were handed out, and photos were taken. But while the champions stood on stage, many people kept looking toward the corner of the gym where Miss Eliza sat, calm and smiling. She didn't win the final trophy, but to most people in the room, she was the real champion of the day. After the event, a small group of young fighters gathered around her. Some brought notebooks. Others just stood quietly, hoping to hear a few words. Eliza looked at them kindly and said, "You all fight well. But remember, this true strength comes when you stop fighting to be seen and start fighting to protect." A young girl raised her hand. "Will you teach us?" Eliza smiled. "Only if you're ready to learn more than punches and kicks." The girl nodded quickly. Others joined in, full of energy and hope. For the first time in years, Eliza saw something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. As she picked up her cane and walked toward the exit, Crowd gently parted for her. People clapped, not loudly, but with warmth. Some bowed, others whispered her name. Lightning, they said. She still got it. Dante, standing near the door, waited for her. He had changed out of his uniform and looked more thoughtful now. I was wondering, he said as she approached, if you'd train me to. Eliza raised an eyebrow. You already have the skills. What do you want to learn? He looked down, then replied, I want to learn patience, respect, and how to be the kind of fighter people remember for the right reasons. Eliza's eyes softened. She placed a hand on his shoulder. By the old dojo. It's still standing. Needs cleaning and the mats are dusty. But the spirit is still there. I'll be there, Dante said quietly. Word spread across town over the next few weeks. People of all ages came looking for Miss Eliza's dojo. Some wanted to train. Others just wanted to meet her and thank her. She didn't ask for money. She only asked for effort. Leave your ego at the door, the sign said outside her school. Bring your heart. The dojo that was once silent now echoed with the sounds of learning, of balance, focus, of growth. Years later, a news reporter came to do a story on her. She asked Miss Eliza, after all these years, what message do you want to give to the next generation? Eliza looked into the camera with a calm smile and said, don't judge anyone by how they look. Age, color, size, none of it tells the full story. Listen before you laugh. Watch before you judge. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who's already walked the hardest path. Her words were shared across the internet, inspiring thousands, and so the legend of Eliza Lightning Bennett lived on, not just in the ring, but in hearts, homes, in the hands of students who now trained with respect. Because real strength never fades. It simply waits till the world is ready to see it again.